Very good evening. You're watching Primetime News on TV1. Bringing you the news, I'm Kaluthara Singha. Up first in your headlines.
Indian COVID-19 vaccines arrive in Sri Lanka. Inoculation program to begin tomorrow. Trade unions request support of the Mahasangha to protect the East Container Terminal. Fungal disease destroys 50% of paddy harvest in Deyandara. Arjuna Ranatunga asks for an interim committee to manage Sri Lanka cricket.
News in detail. Today is Durutu Full Moon Poya Day. The significance of Durutu Full Moon Poya Day is that it marks Gautama Buddha's first visit to Sri Lanka.
Gautama Buddha visited Mahayangana for the first time 9 months after attaining enlightenment. Lord Buddha set foot on Sri Lanka to solve a confrontation between the Yaksha and the Naga clans. During his visit, the Buddha delivered sermons to the clans. After listening to the sermons, the clans gave up fighting with each other and started to respect each other with dignity. The Sila Samadhi program was held at the Kalaniya Raja Mahavihara today in line with the concept of Sports Minister Nama Rajapaksa. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa was also present at the religious event. Dr. Venerable Kehelwala Nandathera from the Maliga Kanda Vidyodaya Pirivana conducted the 206th Poya Day sermon series at the Prime Minister's office today. Meanwhile, the Siri Sadaham Seta Dhamma sermon was held at the Opposition Leader's office under the auspices of Opposition Leader Sajith Premadasa. Venerable Padalangala Dhammatheva Thera conducted the sermon. The Sambuddha Puja was also held at the Shakya Malake opposite the head office of the capital Maharaja Group in Colombo today. News First sponsored the puja and it was conducted by Dr. Venerable Kirinde Assadithera of the Gangarama Viharaya in Hunupitiya. The annual Alut Sahal Mangale or the annual Harvest Festival also took place today at the Temple of the Tooth Relic in Kandy. During this festival, the first crop of the harvest obtained from fields owned by the Temple of the Tooth is offered to the sacred Tooth Relic.
In one of your top stories today, a batch of Oxford AstraZeneca vaccines manufactured in India under the brand name Covishield reached Sri Lanka today. The vaccine needs to be administered from tomorrow.
The batch of vaccines had arrived on a chartered Indian flight at the Bandaranaike International Airport today. Indian High Commissioner to Sri Lanka, Dr. Gopal Bagle, handed over the batch of vaccines to President Gotabaya Rajapaksa at the airport. Issuing a statement, the President's media division said that the batch of vaccines had been exported to Sri Lanka following a request made by the President to India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Very happy that the COVID vaccine made in India have arrived today in Colombo. It is a gift from the government and people of India to fight COVID. I am sure this will be a significant milestone in containing the spread of COVID in Sri Lanka.
The Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, developed by the Oxford University and UK's AstraZeneca Institute, is being manufactured in India by the Serum Institute under the brand name Covishield. Sri Lanka has received 500,000 doses of the vaccine, with the consignment weighing 1,323 kilograms. The COVID-19 vaccines were brought to the Central Vaccine Store located along Deserum Place in Colombo. Our correspondent said that samples of the vaccine were sent to the Medical Research Institute in Barella for an examination. The distribution of the vaccines will begin tonight. We hope that these vaccines would reach all 25 districts by tomorrow. Each district has its central vaccine store. These vaccines will be stored in these facilities. From Saturday, these vaccines will be administered in those districts. But we hope to administer the vaccine in certain areas of the Western Province. We will not halt our process with this batch of 500,000 vaccines. We hope to bring down more vaccines to the country. 10 people can receive the jab from each vial of vaccines. That is how we have received 500,000 doses. When a vial is opened, the vaccine in it must be injected by the evening. If there are remaining vaccines, we cannot use them on a later date. That has to be discarded. However, we hope to carry out our vaccination drive in a planned manner by ensuring that the vaccines are administered to their last drop. About 150,000 healthcare workers in the front line of combating COVID-19 and approximately 125,000 individuals, including Triforce's personnel and police officers, are expected to receive the vaccine. Meanwhile, Lalit Veeratunga, who heads the presidential task force handling the national deployment and vaccination plan, has said that China is expected to provide Sri Lanka with 300,000 vaccines based on a request by the president. Australia's Lowy Institute has ranked Sri Lanka 10th in the list of countries that handle the COVID-19 pandemic effectively. According to the latest analysis, New Zealand has handled the coronavirus pandemic more effectively than any other country in the world. India has been ranked 86th among 96 countries that were taken into consideration as part of the survey. Ukraine has been ranked 90th among the countries that handled the COVID-19 pandemic effectively, among other nations.
1,869 patients infected with COVID-19 recovered from the virus today. Meanwhile, 742 COVID-19 cases were reported yesterday. Among them, 189 of the infected patients were residents of the Colombo district.
Drawing your attention towards a trending international story, the Indian farmers' protest. Today, leaders of 16 opposition parties released a joint statement stating that they would boycott the president's address to Parliament tomorrow ahead of the budget session's commencement.
The leaders reaffirmed their collective demand for the 3 Indian farm laws repeal as they stood in solidarity with the protesting farmers. From parties including the Congress, the opposition leaders said the legislation was quote-unquote an Farmers from all parts of the country are rallying against 2 entities identified as Ambani and Adani. One of those entities is attempting to gain control of the East Container Terminal. Modi has sent them to acquire the terminal and not the Indian government. India has pulled out of the non-aligned movement and has joined hands with the US. If they are planning on giving away the terminal to a country that has withdrawn from the non-aligned movement and has joined hands with an imperialist country, I wish to express my objection towards that, not due to economic problems, but because of geopolitical problems. We must not allow the Indian Ocean to be used as a battleground for superpowers. Our sovereignty is shown to the world through our ports and airports. No one will raise objections if a rubber factory is built in the country and its entirety is sold off to India. But investing in a port is a different matter. The British, Dutch and the Portuguese invaded our country, primarily targeting our ports. It was only after this that they acquired our lands and gained ownership of them. King Rajasingha II sold off the small port of Kodiyar near the Trincomalee port secretly to Napoleon of France without even informing the cabinet of ministers. It was good that Napoleon lost the war. Otherwise, Sri Lanka would have fallen under Napoleon's control. We have protected this port for decades. Bandaranaike had to sacrifice his life for this. The recognition of ports as a national asset was the main slogan during the 1956 election. Disputes arose within the government while recognizing ports as public assets. It was Vimal Vijayawardena who led the struggle for this. At that time, the chief incumbent of the Kalaniya temple, Venerable Buddha Rakhitatthera, told Bandaranaike to avoid making ports as a public asset and to instead give it to him, as he can run the port by establishing a company. A company was already built at that time, but Bandaranaike refused to buy into that request. He made ports a public asset. A massive dispute erupted among the Mahajana Eksat Peramuna over this matter at that time. Nimal Karunathilaka, a parliamentarian from Matale, was removed from his post of General Secretary. Afterwards, Philip Gunawardena, William Silva and Minister Lakshman Rajapaksa left the party. About 10 members resigned at that time. After this took place, Bandaranaike was assassinated by a Buddhist monk. Bandaranaike was assassinated because of the port, as it was not privatized. Therefore, this port is of national and economic importance and has been made a public asset since the leaders of this country have even sacrificed their lives over this. This is our battleground. Therefore, we call on the President and the ministers to reconsider their decision. Based on the global situation, they can invest in another entity if there is a requirement. We cannot give away our ports and airports. We do not have to give it away to any country, even if it is China.
වරාය නැත්නම් එයාපෝට්ස් අරව මේව දෙන්න බෑ කාටවත් කිසිම රට චීනයටවත් කාටවත් දෙන්න අවශ්‍ය නැහැ.
Meanwhile, members of the National Movement to Protect the East Container Terminal met with the members of the Mahasangha headed by the Mahanayaka Theros. Trade union representatives who visited the Malwatu Mahavihara presented their proposals on protecting the East Container Terminal to the Mahanayaka of the Malwatu chapter, Most Venerable Thibbatuwave Sri Sumangala Thero. The trade union activists then met with the Anunayaka of the Malwatu chapter, Most Venerable Niyangada Vijayasiri Thero, and presented the proposals to protect the East Container Terminal. 3 representatives were given the opportunity to meet with the Mahanayaka of the Askari chapter, Most Venerable Warakaguda Jnanaratana Thero. The group also met with the Deputy Registrar of the Askari chapter of the Siam sect, Venerable Narampanavayananda Thero, and presented the proposals to the Venerable Thero.
Responsible members of the Sangha, including the Mahanayaka, the Ramanya sect, met with the Prime Minister yesterday. There were a number of cabinet members present there as well. We expressed our views as the Mahasangha at the Abhayaramaya. The way we see it, these are the results of the wrong foreign policies of all governments that came after 1978. These are the adverse effects of all of that.
They would not have lied to you, but they wouldn't have told you everything. We want these advisors to speak the whole truth. If this goes to the cabinet on Monday, this will be a big issue. So we hope that you will support us in preventing this from happening. We received information that the Prime Minister is against handing this over. According to the information we received, he too is helpless now. We believe that if you speak with the President, he will be able to get this done.
Representatives of the trade unions then met with the chief incumbent of the Gatambe Rajapavana Rama Vihara, Venerable Kapitipola Siri Vimala Thero.
All of us want to save these and bring the country to a better path. That is why we searched far and wide and found Gotabaya Rajapaksa. We consider Gotabaya Rajapaksa as a man with a strong backbone. But when we see what is happening, it tarnishes his good name. Even today we believe that he is a man who stands his ground. There is a possibility for this to change in the future as well. We hope that we will get a positive response.
Members of the National Movement to Protect the East Container Terminal visited the Ranamala Raja Mahavihara this evening and met with the Anunayaka of the Malwatu chapter, Venerable Dimbul Kumare Vimaladamma Thero.
Our government came into power pledging that we won't sell off national resources. We have no right to do that. We request the President and the Prime Minister to lend an ear to the people. They can make those remarks and even insist that it will be given away definitely, but we will have to face the repercussions of those moves. The people are not foolish. In 2015, they defeated the leader who won us the war. They defeated the good governance government in 2 years since they came into power. The Sri Lanka Freedom Party did not stand with us at that time. Therefore, we cannot thrive on power and act in an arrogant manner. As a government that came into power with the support of the Mahasangha and as one that speaks on the country's heritage, we are of the stance that the voice of the Mahasangha must be given more consideration. This government has found itself at the center of a diplomatic crisis. We are of the stance that we should seek a solution while protecting the East Container Terminal and the government. An internal discourse is already being created on this matter. We will engage in a struggle to make this the stance of the government.
As far as we know, arrangements are being made to submit a cabinet paper on this matter, but we are not certain as to whether it would be a proposal. We have not received the recommendations submitted by the 2 cabinet subcommittees. It has not been discussed yet. The previous government was defeated mainly because of the central bank bond scam. Just as Mahindran had connections to Ranil Wickremesinghe, the Adani company has links to the government of Modi's India. The Adani Group is the Indian version of Sri Lanka's Perpetual Treasuries Limited.
කඳු දයනවලු කැබිනට් පත්‍රිකාවක්
A cabinet paper is to be submitted on Monday. They will try to remove it from the Ports Authority through any means, regardless of whether it is being given away to one or 5 entities of the Adani Group. This is nothing other than a betrayal.
If Adani is more important to Gotabaya when compared to the 22 million people, then we wish to ask him to choose one out of the two. He has to take the side of either India's Adani Group or the people of Sri Lanka. If they are interested in India, we wish to ask them to prepare themselves to be unseated from power.
The External Affairs Minister came to Sri Lanka to discuss the East Container Terminal. As he left the country, we heard the news of the East Container Terminal being given away. We built a power plant of our own to meet the bulk of the electricity demand. China is seeking control of the Norochole plant if the East Container Terminal is given to India for sale at present. Ultimately, the people of this country will have nothing left in this country.
Meanwhile, the Sinhala Janabalavagiya staged a protest in Kaluthara today. The protest was staged over several factors, including the transfer of shares in the East Container Terminal to a foreign company.
We strongly oppose any attempt made by parties who come to power intending to plunder the country's national resources by making false promises to the general public. We are waiting to see the outcome of this. We support entirely any attempt made to protect the East Container Terminal.
And with that, we cross over to a short commercial break. Stay with News First. We will be right back.
Yesterday, News First exposed how Australia's Titanium Sands Limited had acquired 2 Mauritian shell firms that own 5 companies which hold licenses to explore minerals on Manor Island. Titanium Sands Limited has already announced its intentions to mine and export the minerals by gaining control over the project. How did the Australian company get hold of these licenses? Kilsit Exploration, that holds an exploration license, was set up on the 3rd of September 2015. Since its establishment, all shares of the company were held by its parent firm, Kilsit Investments Private Limited. The initial director of the parent company, Kobiraman Balakrishnan, had resigned on the 12th of January 2016, paving way for 2 individuals, Priyantha Abewardene and Robert Nelson, to become directors. On the 10th of March 2016, Abewardene and Nelson allowed all shares of the parent company, Kilsit Investments, to be sold to a Mauritius firm named Srilel Holdings Limited at a mere 1,000 rupees. Srilel Holdings was ultimately acquired by Titanium Sands Limited. Hammersmith Ceylon, set up on the 29th of September 2015, holds 2 licenses to explore Manor Islands. In this firm as well, Gobiraman Balakrishnan, who served as the first director, resigned on the 12th of January 2016, paving the way for Priyantha Abewardene and Robert Nelson to become directors. All shares of Hammersmith Ceylon, valued at just 1,000 rupees, were transferred by its initial shareholder Kobiraman Balakrishnan to a company named Singalanka Investments Private Limited. At that time, Singalanka Investments was owned by the Mauritius company Srilel Holdings Limited. Srilel Holdings was ultimately acquired by Titanium Sands Limited. Supreme Solutions, set up on the 24th of November 2015, holds 2 licenses to explore Manor Islands. The company had been registered as a subsidiary of Singalanka Investments a day after Priyantha Abewardene and Robert Nelson became directors of the parent company. As Singalanka Investments was already owned by Mauritius company Srilel Holdings Limited, the licenses slipped into the possession of the foreign entity. Srilel Holdings was ultimately acquired by Titanium Sands Limited. Orion Minerals, set up on the 7th of July 2015, owns 2 exploration licenses. All shares of the company, valued at 6 million rupees, were sold to a company named Rotim Investments Private Limited. At the time of selling the shares, Adrian Lee Nelson, a shareholder of Titanium Sands Limited, was serving as a director of Orion Minerals Limited. Priyantha Abewardene and Robert Nelson were serving as directors of Rotim Investments that purchased the license holder. At that time, Rotim Investments had been owned by a Mauritius company named Bright Angel Limited that was later acquired by Titanium Sands. Sanur Minerals, that holds 2 exploration licenses, had been established on the 29th of September 2015 under its parent company Sanur Asia Investments Private Limited. All shares of Sanur Asia Investments, valued at just 1,000 rupees, was owned by Kobiraman Balakrishnan, who was also an initial director. Just as in previous occasions, Kobiraman Balakrishnan had resigned on the 13th of January 2016, paving the way for Priyantha Abeyewardene and Robert Nelson to take over as directors. Following his resignation, Kobiraman had sold all shares of Sanur Asia Investments to Rotim Investments Limited, in which Abeyewardene and Nelson were directors. At that time, Rotim Investments had been owned by a Mauritius company named Bright Angel Limited, that was later acquired by Titanium Sands Limited. More details on this story tomorrow.
Do you remember? 9 tremors rocked the Digan area in Kandy in 3 months. 4 tremors occur on the 5th of December. Dolomite mining takes place in the area rocked by tremors. Massive blasting occurs at the site. Environment Minister appoints a committee to investigate the tremors. Committee releases report outlining reasons for the tremors. Dolomite mining banned within a certain radius of the Victoria Dam. Instructions issued to conduct further investigations. Can 9 tremors that occurred in 3 months at a particular location be easily forgotten? Shouldn't more attention be paid towards this problem?
News First. The truth as it is.
Do your online shopping now with Sambole.lk to get it home delivered or pick up on your way.
Sambole.lk.
Taking a look at the political arena of the country. Speaking in Anuradhapura today, Minister Padli Champika Ranawaka expressed his stance on the current economic situation of Sri Lanka.
ඔබ සියලු දෙනා දකින්න ඇති මහ බැංකුව නිවේදනයක් දුන්නා සියලුම පුජ්‍යලික බැංකුව වලට ඉදිරි කාලේ.
You saw how the central bank had announced that all private banks will be required to suspend transactions in dollars and agreements for the next 3 months. What is the reason behind that? It is to pay back the loan of $200 million our government took on the 19th of this month. Accordingly, the central bank requested other banks in the country to provide the $200 million under an interest of 1%. That was because the central bank had received the $200 million under the interest of 1%. However, the other banks were only willing to do so for an interest of 7%. That is $44 million. That is what happened. This means that only 22% in the market responded positively to this proposal. Therefore, the government had to pay off the rest of the debt using the money allocated for imports. If that did not happen, Sri Lanka would have gone bankrupt on the 19th of this month. As a result, we did not have the money to pay for our imports. When the dollar started appreciating towards 200 rupees, another $100 million were utilized to keep the rupee afloat during the last 15 days. Where did they get that money from? Those are leftover funds of the good governance government from 2019. That is how they are protecting their dollars. How can we operate the country in such a manner? It is not just $200 million. We have a total of $7,000 million to pay off within the course of this year. That is impossible. I don't know how many people in the ruling party understand this.
මේක ගෙවා ගැනීමට අද අපට ඉතාමත්ම අපහසු නොහැකි තත්ත්වයක් තියෙනවා. මම දන්නේ ආණ්ඩුවේ ඉන්න කී දෙනෙකුට මේව තේරුණාද කියලා.
Meanwhile, views are being expressed on the price of oil in the market. This was after the matter was raised during a cabinet media briefing held recently.
I
informed the cabinet that the Treasury had imposed a high tax on fuel when its cost had declined. The cost of fuel has increased. Therefore, the Treasury must reduce this tax. If the tax is not reduced, the price of petrol would have to be increased. That is why I suggested that the tax must be reduced. The President also said that the tax must be slashed as we cannot increase the cost of the product.
Meanwhile, former Speaker Karu Jayasuriya spoke about the income that was lost due to corrupt deals that were reported in the last few days. We saw the president speaking extensively about corruption recently. Therefore, it is important for him to focus his attention on the sugar deal. There has been a huge public discourse on this deal and the Bank of Ceylon. The Association of Sugar Importers said that the government lost an income of 1.3 trillion rupees because of this deal. It is in the best interest of the president to find out who approved these deals and who gave the license. Even the financial committee said that they believe that this concession has not been given to the people. When I look at this, I see a robbery that has been committed in broad daylight. We are in pain when we speak about this, but more than that, we are ashamed. We request him to take action against this scam, even if the people involved in it are close friends.
මෙතනින් පටන් අරන් ඒ වරදකරු හොයලා කොච්චර බලගත්ු කෙනෙක් වුණත් හිතවත් කෙනෙක් වුණත් ඒ අවශ්‍ය පියවර ගන්න කියලා අපි එතුමාගෙන් ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා.
Meanwhile, a protest was organized in Thanamalwila charging that the cost of living has gone up significantly. The protesters said that it was the authorities' responsibility to provide some relief to the people who have been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic.
එලෝලු එහෙම ගොඩක් මිලයි හැමදේම ඉතින් මිලයි ඇහුවොත් බඩු අතේ හැරයි මෑ කරල් 100යි තක්කාලි 100යි දැන් දැනෙන්නේ මේ ගොඩක්ම මිල වැඩි කියන එක තමයි
බඩු නම් මිලයි මාත්‍රෝ මේ කාල් 105යි පොල් 110යි 20යි ඔය ගණන් වලට තියෙන්නේ හැමදේම බඩු වලින් මිලයි මිල අඩුවීමක් කරේද කියලා හිතා ගන්න අමාරුයි.
While discourse continues to persist on the East Container Terminal of the Colombo port, farmers in the country continue to suffer due to a drop in their harvest.
Farmers in the Mathura district have begun harvesting their crops for this cultivation season. However, they lament that their harvest is less than half of what they reaped the previous years. Grief-stricken farmers attribute the loss of harvest due to the spread of weed among paddy fields. Several farmers in Deyandara, Sinipella, Mulatiyana and Kambudupitiya are facing this issue. The problem we are facing at present is that weed that are harmful to the plants is spreading across paddy fields. Neither the government nor the agrarian office has developed a plan to stem the spread of weed. Private traders in the market sell us paddy seeds at a very high price. That is what we use in our fields. We feel that this problem can be resolved if the Agrarian Services Centre can intervene in this and sell us the seeds. Farmers lament that agrarian officers have not paid attention to this issue and they demand for a solution to this matter.
Meanwhile, the UN Human Rights Chief has recommended the removal of security personnel and public officials credibly implicated of human rights violations in Sri Lanka from office.
The UN Human Rights Commissioner has made several recommendations to the Sri Lankan government on taking action on matters concerning human rights in the country. In her annual report, High Commissioner Michelle Bachelet called on Sri Lanka to promptly, thoroughly and impartially investigate all allegations of gross human rights violations. On the same lines, the report urged the government to give the highest priority to ensuring accountability in long-standing emblematic cases. High Commissioner Bachelet also recommended the government to implement other reforms of the security to strengthen and ensure accountability. Among the recommendations was the establishment of a moratorium on the use of the Prevention of Terrorism Act for new arrests until it is replaced by legislation that adheres to international best practices. The Human Rights Chief also called on the government to establish standard procedures for granting presidential pardons and other forms of clemency. Meanwhile, the High Commissioner has also recommended the United Nations Human Rights Council and member states to explore possible targeted sanctions such as asset freezes and travel bans against credibly alleged perpetrators of grave human rights violations. The report also urged UN agencies to keep under review Sri Lanka's contributions to UN peacekeeping operations and screening systems for Sri Lankan personnel.
Former Test cricket captain Arjuna Ranatunga expressed his views on the current situation of Sri Lanka cricket at a media briefing held in Colombo today.
Removing the chairman of the selection committee, changing the captain or removing certain players will not solve the problem. Therefore, everyone must step aside for a brief period and hand over the reins to the past players to consider whether they are capable of managing the game. I wish to responsibly state that if we are given that responsibility, we will make certain crucial decisions in 6 months. Discipline must be created first. If Namal Rajapaksa wants to develop the game, he can do it. That is because he has links to the President and the Prime Minister. Strict decisions will have to be made with such protection. Those decisions will not be made to appease individuals. But in another 2 years, everyone will admit that it was the right call. Some say that interim committees cannot be appointed. Those are false. I will not intervene into this matter given the mess that is surrounding it. It is not just me, but good cricketers will not get involved in this. But if the management is handed over to us, they will be interested in lending their contribution. We have several good coaches. Even in the case of Mahela Jayawardena's committee, I have my doubts as to whether some of its recommendations can be implemented. Strict decisions must be made to implement those decisions. If the sport minister wants to rectify the shortcomings, he must opt for an interim committee. Otherwise, in another 2 years, we will realize the destruction that has befallen the game.
මම කෙටියෙන්ම කියන්නේ ක්‍රීඩාමතිවරයාට මේක හදන්න ඕන නම් අතුරුපාලක මණ්ඩලයක් ගන්න ඕනේ නැත්නම් තව අවුරුදු දෙකක් යනකොට තේරෙයි මේකේ විනාශයතාව කොච්චර දුරට යනවද.
And that is all the news we have for you this evening. I'm Tarushi Kumar Singh along with our sign language interpreter for tonight, Tarka Gabriel. Good night and take care.